Welcome to this first video on digitizing cultural heritage. So in this initial introductory guide, all I really want to do is talk about the history of photogrammetry and how it can be beneficial towards heritage. So what is photogrammetry? Well, at its basis, it's the use of images to create accurate measurements inside of 3D models, or to draw accurate measurements in 3D models. We can expand on that by saying it's an art, science, and technology of applying geometry and mathematics to photographs for obtaining reliable information about physical objects and environments. So it can be quite useful for landscape mapping, or it can be quite useful for buildings and artifact mapping as well. The input for photogrammetry, as I've said, is photographs, and the output can be maps, drawings, measurements, and 3D models. And these 3D models provide us an opportunity to engage with the public in new and interesting ways. When we look at the history of photogrammetry, we can take a step back in time to the kind of beginning of the philosophy around optics. So in the 5th century, we have philosophers talking about the theory of camera obscuras. And by the 10th century, we have actually people developing these pinhole type cameras and demonstrating that images projected from outside of the camera body or outside of a room through the pinhole came from outside the hole and were helped by the light and the optics. Then advances in mathematics, and in particular in perspective geometry, was assisting architects, and then later some of the Renaissance artists into developing their art and creating kind of 3D images inside of 2D canvases. Tools like the camera lucida then were created to help with the use of mirrors to translate the real world onto 2D canvases. So the camera lucida was such a tool, and it's painted in 1806 by William Wallinson. It kind of helps a lot of artists to kind of recreate that real world effect on their images. Photography then is the next step, and this is kind of one of the big advances for taking measurements. So when we get the first kind of lasting photographs in the 1820s, that's then used by map makers to take accurate measurements of photographs. So photographs of Paris were taken from hot air balloons, and then known measurements from those images were used to map out the city. So we see this kind of used again and again throughout military processes, where you get this technique called stereoscopy, where we're taking two kind of slightly angled images of the same subject, and by overlaying these using special glasses, you're able to create a 3D image of the landscape. By the 1980s and up through the 90s and into the noughties, computer technology is gaining popularity and gaining more power, and it's now possible to align multiple images to create 3D objects using computers. So what are the basic tools that you're going to need for photogrammetry? Well, at the most fundamental, what you're going to need is a camera. There's lots of different models of cameras, lots of different styles of cameras, everything from your phone camera to high-end, powerful digital SLR cameras. So the point and shoot camera, these are cameras with basic functions, and they're used in automatic mode. And like I said, they're everything from your mobile phone to the cameras that you might bring on a night out. And they can be very useful when you're starting out, so you're not comfortable with the manual settings that you'll find on higher ranges of cameras. So these kind of next level up of cameras would be called compact cameras. They're kind of a bridge between the more powerful professional cameras and the more kind of compact, the portable cameras. They have all the functions and ranges of the more powerful cameras, but they would come with lenses attached that you can't take away from the body. So they have some limitations, but they would have all of the manual functions that the digital single lens reflex cameras have, or the digital SLR cameras. These are your top end cameras. They offer a wider range of control over your shooting, how you control the light and how you control the scene that you're trying to create a picture from. And they generally come with detachable lenses, so you can change in and out the lenses and apply filters to these lenses as well. There's no general rule as to what camera is best for photogrammetry. Many people who practice photogrammetry will use everything from their mobile phone right up to a digital SLR, but good photogrammetry kits will have a range of different type of cameras. So being able to use your camera and knowing the functions of your camera is probably the most important step. So within a camera collection for photogrammetry, you'd want possibly a range of lenses. You'd certainly want a tripod, a remote trigger, and then backup kind of batteries and SD cards, because you're going to be taking a lot of images from your camera for this, and it's going to build up over time. You can have then additional tools, things like color cards, studio lights, potter's wheel or lazy Susan for rotating artifacts, and measuring tapes then are quite important for taking accurate measurements of the subjects. Finally, then we need to talk about computers. At a minimum, you can have a computer with 8 gigabytes of RAM and a graphics card of about 4 gigabytes, and generally laptops you'll find are just about as powerful as main computers now. And then the software that we're going to be using, we'll be speaking about Agisoft Metashape throughout these tutorials, but you can see that there's a wide range of software, and depending on your needs, then you can decide what's best for you. In this second video, I want to talk about getting to know your camera and using your camera for photogrammetry. The terms I'll be talking about relate generally to digital SLR cameras, but you'll find these terms used for any sort of camera with manual settings. The first thing to think about is the lens of the camera, the aperture or the f-stop, how wide we open the lens up. And you can think about this as the human eye, and it controls how much light we see into the camera. Low f numbers or low f-stop numbers will open the lens up to more light, but they help to blur out the background. And this is something we want to try and avoid with photogrammetry. So we don't want blurry backgrounds. We want kind of a depth of field so that we can see the detail behind the object, and the software can determine the difference between them. So we can use high f-stop numbers, and these will allow us to bring the background into focus. So you can see from this image taken with a very high f-stop of f22 that you can see a lot of the detail there in the background. So as we kind of change f-stop numbers, then we need to control our shutter speed. So low f numbers will allow more light in, so then we need a short or a fast shutter speed to help to darken up the image. So if we're letting too much light in, we'll get washed out images. If we're using high f-stop numbers, we need to allow less light in, so a slow shutter speed then will be needed for the cameras. These longer shutter speeds mean that we might end up with blurry subjects, and shorter means that we will get clear subjects. So it's about finding a balance between the two of these, that we're going to get good images and good clear and crisp images for photogrammetry. The next kind of tool in controlling our images is called the ISO. For photogrammetry, we need kind of low ISO numbers, so low light sensitivity for the camera. The ISO numbers, as they increase, they'll begin to add more noise into the cameras, but they can also help in darkened environments. So while you should be trying to control darker environments with your aperture and shutter speed, you might need to use ISO numbers then to let a little bit more light sensitivity in, but bearing in mind that once you get, say, beyond ISO 400, that you're going to be getting noise inside of your photographs, and again, this is something that we should avoid for photogrammetry. Finding a balance between the aperture, the ISO, and the shutter speed is kind of the golden rule of photography. It's the exposure triangle, and there's no kind of need to get your head kind of caught up in the maths and the science of it, but just really know that we want clean, crisp images, and these are the 3 settings on a manual camera that we can use to do that. The next thing that we want to do is choose a lens for our camera, and then this is where the field of view, the wide angle or the narrow angle of the lens comes in, so how much of the world we can see through a particular camera position. Generally, lenses between 18 and 55 millimeters are quite good for photogrammetry, with around 50 being the correct scale for the human eye when we're processing for photogrammetry. Anything then that gets above 70 millimeters, so if we're using long telephoto lenses, we're affecting the measurement of the object. So the object will come out quite small inside a 3D space, whereas we're using a wider angle lens, it will come out more kind of close to its realistic size. So how do we take photographs for photogrammetry? So we've come up with a number of different techniques for this, and kind of the key thing to keep in mind when you're doing photogrammetry is that photos should overlap anything between 60 and 80%. So again, there's no kind of steadfast rule of the exact overlap, but there should be a decent amount of overlap between each image. This should mean that any one kind of focal point should be visible in at least 3 photographs. So as I say, each point should be visible in about 3 photographs. So you're moving a set distance between photos and trying to keep that focal point in each of those images. So you can see if you're moving around the edge of a building here, you would try and keep the corner of the building in all of those images. So it should be visible from at least 3 of those images. If you then want to focus on something like a facade, you can shoot at a slight angle, moving the camera, slightly angling it against the subject over time, and then move your position and then repeat that process. And it's a good idea to repeat that in reverse and then create this system where you kind of repeat those 3 images at different angles, move position, again, then repeat that in reverse. And you're creating this overlapped facade by moving your body and the camera along. If you want to record interiors, the best way that we found to do it is to walk with your back against a wall, shooting across the room to the other side, so that you're constantly with your back to a wall and you're shooting to the opposite direction. And this helps then to stitch all of those images back together, again with overlap. Recording the exterior, again, you're taking 1 step each time and a photograph each time, moving around the object that you want to record. If you want to then focus on a small bit of detail, you can step a bit closer, taking a photo each time you step closer, and then repeat the same method for the facades. You can also move from inside to outside quite seamlessly if you can find a large enough opening like a door. So you'd focus on the opening and then take a series of photographs around the edge of that opening, moving through the door as you record, and then completing that with an exterior process or a facade process again. Sometimes you're not able to walk around an object in 360, so I generally suggest a zigzag pattern, and this could be taking 3 photos across, left to right, 1 photo down, and then repeat that process back, right to left across, repeat that process down and left to right again, and then depending on how big or how small the object is, you want to repeat this in reverse. So you're going to need to kind of multiply your photographs by repeating this a number of times using that zigzag pattern to go up and down the object. You want to record the object as much as possible. There should be an overlap of a minimum of 6 photos. I would say you definitely want at least 12, 24 photographs around an object, and repeat this then at different heights and different angles so that you get full coverage. If you want to record artifacts that are portable, you can use a potter's wheel. And potter's wheels come in extremely handy, that you can rotate the object while keeping the camera on a tripod. A Lazy Susan or a cake stand will also work for this. So you're rotating the object, you'll get an average rotation of about 32 turns for each object, and then you could change the camera height and angle, repeat that process, change the camera height and angle again, and repeat that process. And then once again, you could change that camera height and angle and repeat the process again. You could also turn the object upside down and repeat this whole process then in reverse. So you'll get full 360 coverage of the object. The important thing to keep in mind is that your object is dead center in the camera's focus. So if you look on the right here, the object is rotating around a center point, whereas on the left, it's swinging back and forth between the right and the left of that center point line. And if this is happening with your object, it's going to go further and closer to the camera, so it's going to go in and out of focus, and it's not going to work as well. This is just a demonstration of me walking around an object. So each time I take a step, I take a photograph, and I walk around in a circular motion, trying to keep the same distance from the object each time. When I want to focus on an area, then I can move a little bit closer. I can then start to take photographs, kind of making sure the object's always in the viewfinder, so kind of looking through it once in a while, and then moving closer and then changing to a zigzag pattern where I want to create a little bit of detail. And it's kind of recording this detail across the object that we can increase our kind of photo numbers and then increase the detail that we're getting from this as well. So it's a matter of just repeating this process and repeating different coverage steps around the object to get full coverage and to make sure that you have full details from all of your photographs. On average, you're going to be talking about anything between 70 to 115 photographs for a very small object. You could be looking at 115 to 180 photographs for a medium object, and then larger objects you could be getting more photos. If you want to record the bottom of an object, you can then just turn it over and repeat this process again. So there's no set kind of rules for photogrammetry, and you'll find your own processes, but these are just the general processes that I've found are quite helpful.